All right, we're back for another Ensold conversation around building depth in your business. This is for entrepreneurs in all genres. Um, we're at the cusp of something really fun because this is where we've moved out of our talk about how whether to do contract or hourly or the money of projects and how to navigate some of the nuance there. And we're about to step into the project space. So we're moving into the actual work component. And I use the term story arc. And I do that for a couple of reasons. Every project has a story. If you're building a house from a brand new lot, there's the planning part, and then there's the city municipality permitting part, and then there's the excavation, and there's a foundation, there's the framing, then there's the roof, okay, then there's what we call lockup, then there's the insulation poly drywall, okay, and then there's the interior finishing, ends with paint, landscaping, there's the house. So you can put each of those segments into different categories. And when you start to understand the story arc of your business, you're going to see that every project has a story, but most of the time the projects follow the same path. And this was like a neat revelation. It's like if I understand how to unpackage the story of a project, that does two things simultaneously. One, it helps me understand, because so much of the risk of doing a contract, a fixed sum, is getting into a situation that you don't understand. I didn't expect that. I didn't see it coming. And those are the unforeseen elements that are often the most expensive for us. And at the worst case scenario, they cost us a ton of money because we left something out and had to perform anyways. Best case scenario, it's still an awkward conversation with a client after understanding. Great. But they don't have to be, and you can't control how other people respond. And I never want to, knock, Mr. Klein, I'm sorry, I forgot to include the purchasing of the wood or the painting of the product when it was all done, and that's going to be this much extra. It's a glitch in the system. Can we recover from these? Absolutely. It's not doom and gloom, and it's not all over if you make an error. That's to err is human. So it's okay, but we can avoid them. And part of the process that we get to do is we grow in our capacity and maturity as business leaders is start to understand where the common errors occur. And when you understand the story of your project, even if you're doing web design, there's an initial client consultation, there's you understand your platform, sketching out how many, you get to walk through your project, because every project has a beginning, middle, and an end. That's how it is. And there's always a doldrum in the middle. Okay, it's classic, and I'm drawing on my own experience. It's like if you have a 3-day project, day 2 might be the hard day where everyone's just a little slow. If you have a 7-month project, month 3 and 4 just kind of dragged on. It just happens. There's parts of the project that are less glamorous than others, and that's okay. We know that. So, all right. So if you're talking about a story arc, I want you to understand that your story, I want to pick a color that's going to work for us here, is that generally, and I like arcs because they're more natural to how life truly happens. And I've really purposed to deconstruct a lot of the very rigid, linear business processes that are so cerebral and devoid of lived experience and soul and all the things that make this life worth living, because you're going to see lots of Gantt chart project timelines, and it's like everything's sequenced. It's so dull. I heard a good saying that I keep in mind is there's no straight lines in nature, and I heard that when I was out in the woods exploring. And we were actually looking for some animals, just sightseeing. It was because the Okanagan, we have lots of mountain ranges. How do you find an elk in the forest out here? And the answer was there's no straight lines in nature. So it's like if you see a straight line, it's just our eyes draw to that because we live in a city most of the time and everything's rectilinear. Anyways, just saying that. No straight lines in nature. Stuck out to me. So story arcs are fun. And what we get to do is just acknowledge that there's a beginning. Oh, golly, B-I-G. Again, talking and spelling. Spelling's not my forte, and I'm okay with that. and then there's an end. And then somewhere in between is the work. Now, regardless of what's in between and how granular, how big or how small you make those pieces, that's less relevant. What I want you to understand is that in the midst of every single one of these, and just so we have more to talk about here, your project and your domain, no matter what it is going to contain elements that you easily understand. You might understand your internal processes. That's like you're super competent here. There's often a city permit compliant part here that introduces some risks. So I call that yellow. It's not impossible. We've gone through the permitting process before, but there's often a surprise, or there can be a surprise there. Anyways, so I want you to go through and you're going to look at your process. And hopefully, if you're competent in your domain, there's going to be several things that you understand. And if you understand this much of your project, you need to do it contract. I'm saying I think there's a real opportunity for you to do it under contract, because most of the project is within your core competencies. You might find that there's a couple of areas that you're not sure about that are risky. And you might even find one area that is like super high stakes that you don't know about, or that you're unsure about, or that could cost you more than the whole project's worth, or. And what's so critical is for you to see this. Because once you take it outside of your head, and once you get it outside of these linear things, you can start to label things for what they are, and then specifically look for the areas where there's risk. And when I say risk, it can be administrative risk, extra expenses. I was surprised with a building permit fee on one of the projects we did this summer. I'm used to it being this for whatever reason. There was a special levy assessed, and it was an additional $870. Okay, I didn't expect that, but I did know that the permitting process is where variables can get thrown in that are outside of the plan. So I said to the client, hey, listen, we're going into permits. I'm filing it as I'm following the process. Everything's submitted. I've actually called for a pre-inspection so that we can get on the same page with the inspector, because I don't want the inspector to come in over here and tell me that I should have done something back here. So pre-conversation with the inspector, and we have an extra fee that the city's assessed. Okay. No big deal, but I know that they can be there, so we had conversations, we were ready for it. We also didn't plan our work to start, the day after we filed our permit. We gave ourselves some space, some breathing room for the pre-inspection, some adjustments to be made so we could start. So our start date was reflective of that buffer space that might be required, and it was. So we weren't late, and we were not under pressure. Midway, so in this particular project, we were taking apart a rotten section of a wall, and which meant that we had to have shoring on the inside and outside because it's a structural wall and it was totally decayed and so on. So there was a part here where we were taking apart all the wall surfaces which were still intact, and it's like, what are we going to find behind these rotten walls? And there's an unknown there. It's like we're taking apart the rotten structure. Does it end here? Does it go over here? Is it all the way over there? And so there's definitely an unknown in that element. Now, it's not catastrophic. It's like it's going to be plywood and 2x6s and some rot. That's what's going to be there. So even though there was some unknowns, it's not totally outside of our wheelhouse. So taking that into account, showed up with extra crew, extra garbage bags, dump trailer. We had lots of hands available to handle the deconstruction disassembly, and we also phased our work so that there was an intentional disassembly phase. Like the deconstruction is part of our story, because we mobilize. In our quoting process, the deconstruction is often like the first part. We have to take apart the existing to discover the issue. Then we can offer the repair to the broken components. So deconstruction, then there's the reconstruction. So acknowledging that, again, we opened it up not knowing exactly what it was going to look like, but we did the work and found out, okay, it's within reason what we expected. And then we started the reconstruction, but then I'm put this one here. It just happens to line up. We have a house on stilts now. You know, it's like that's what it is. It's fully supported. Now we've done that properly, but this is a huge risk. If there's any settlement, if the poles collapse, if there's movement, if the kids decide to have a party on the deck outside, and you know, or a strong wind event or anything like this, the house could collapse. Is that a problem? Yeah, because I can promise you the price of the repair that we're doing is nominal in contrast to the price of a 4-year-old 2-story house that collapses, right? So this is a big deal for us. And this is where it's an all hands on deck. This is where your site safety is an important part. But sometimes, like, safety is the one part that could make it red. Could we get hurt? Could it fall on us? Okay. Could we do damage to the property? Could we set ourselves back in terms of schedule significantly? Do we understand the risks? Okay, so what did we do? We navigated that tenderly with the best tradesmen that I could get on my team. I brought all the experienced guys for this. When we're taking the shoring down onto our new framing, and yes, did we have our framing inspection before that? Did I get all eyes on our repair before we took our supports out? Yes. Okay, so that's how we could mitigate the high risk. So that was probably a 2-hour window of like the big red spot. Now, if I wasn't comfortable with, well, the shoring and the settlement and the risk and the whatever, there's too much uncertainty. What are we going to find? What are the permit guys going to do? I don't know. I'll do this hourly. What I would have left personally, I would have left as a company a lot of money on the table, because I told you in previous episodes here, what we can charge hourly is a lot less than what a contract will allow. So I understand that there's risk, but it doesn't mean stop. Going back in time, we in a previous conversation, we talked about when you're dabbling in new domains, and this would be a different, another portion of this. I'm going to use analogy of landscaping. If you're a landscaper who cuts grass, and then somebody says, hey, listen, would you trim my shrubs? Is that green, yellow, or red? Well, to me, that's yellow. It's like, do I have the tools? I might need to go buy another tool. Do I have the skills? Well, we can cut straight lines and weed whack. Can we do that up here? Sure. So just because you can mow the lawn doesn't mean you can trim shrubs. I can promise you I can mow the lawn, but you should not get me to trim your shrubs ever. It's just, that is not my core competency whatsoever. So that would be yellow or red for us. But let's pretend you're a landscaper, so you want to go from grass to shrubs. Okay, yellow. You get better at that, and then somebody says, hey, would you do my irrigation? Well, that's different. That's pipes in the ground. Now you're into essentially plumbing. There's different elements to that. Okay, so that's definitely yellow for me if I'm going from grass cutting to irrigation. Is it impossible? No. Do I understand the mechanics of dirt and sod? Because I'm going to dig some trenches in somebody's lawn and wreck their grass, but I'm really good at grass, so I know that I can put it all back together again when it's done, and it'll look good, and they'll be happy with the finished product. So that might be a solid yellow, but it's still yellow. It's definitely not green, as distinct from if they said, hey, could you also mulch all the leaves and do a cleanup and put some bark mulch in the back at the end of the year? Well, that would be green, no question, because it's well inside of, I've never done that before, but it's well inside of our core competencies. No problem. No extra equipment, no extra experience needed. We can do that. But if somebody came along to you and said, hey, you're really good at cutting my grass, you did my irrigation, can you build a retaining wall? Well, that's red. Like, it's not saying don't. Lots of landscapers build retaining walls, but of course, it's heavy equipment, there's operator certificates, it's a retaining wall, it's managing the logistics of that. I'm not saying a retaining wall will collapse, but it could settle. I've seen lots of Allen block walls where there's like a low point because the compaction wasn't done properly, or the uphill irrigation or movement of water through the soil was not considered, so there's an undermining taking place. All that to say, it is not cutting grass. It is still a landscaper's domain. So can you move there? Yeah, but it represents a deviation from your business, your core competency. So take it. Just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean you should take it. And I realize this too as I'm saying that, the word opportunity. That's if I see there's an opportunity and I feel that like, oh, I could, they're offering me $20,000 to do a retaining wall, and that's great money. Opportunity is a word that the ego lives in. Potential is much more from essence. What's the company calling for? Does the company want to express itself And that's a combination of you, your team, and the pulse of your company. Does it want to become retaining walls, or is it really good at being a reoccurring lawn and garden maintenance company? And let's leave the heavy construction and the excavation to somebody else, because you realize the essence of digging things out and stacking them up and holding them back, that's a whole different feel in the environmental context than manicuring things so that they're in harmony with the right fertilizers and balanced pollination, things like this. So just because there's an opportunity doesn't mean it's right for you, your team, or your business. And one of the things I've had to do is just grow and realize when to say no. Red sometimes for me is there's a risk component, like, wow, that's heavy equipment and all I do is lawnmowers. But it also sometimes is like a conscience thing or an ethos thing. And we've definitely moved away from, I used to be big into epoxies, polyurethanes, chemicals. Like at one point we were perhaps the most sophisticated concrete repair, restoration, remediation contracting company in the valley, and there's a lot of chemicals associated with that type of work. And I remember going home just fried. When you're doing xylene to clean your tools and your hands, and I don't care if you got the 3M respirator on, it's still heavy, like it soaks in through your eyes. And I'm like, this sucks for my team. I'm feeling bad, if they got to touch this stuff, if they get it on their skin, it's just not good. The environment, where does all this stuff go? And we just moved away from it. So can we do it? Yeah. Is that where our heart is? No. Instead, we're passive house certified builders now. It's like we care about doing things in a conscious way so that, in 100 years, my great grandchildren don't regret that I was in business and I did what I did. Don't talk about Uncle Brandon. It's like, I don't want that. But I had to wake up. I was coming from a place where bigger was better and more powerful and hoorah. And if there was black smoke when it burned, I was pumped. It just meant I wanted the full strength, the full juice. And again, so red for me now has there's a conscience component to it. There's a do no harm. And if red will do harm, and there's reasons now I won't build houses for certain people or certain designs, because no, that'll cause problems. It'll waste a ton of energy if we build that. It'll also decay the building and hurt the occupants over time if the walls fill with mold, which is that house we were talking about. There's mushrooms in the walls, man. It was a 4-year-old house. It's just bad news. But so I don't want to do that. I don't want to do harm. Those are red things for me. And they're red, not red, be cautious, go into those opportunities with wisdom. It's red, that for me is like a red light. Full stop, not doing it. You have your domain. Just take a moment and consider where your lines are, because not every opportunity is something you should pursue. Not every opportunity is something that your community will be happy you pursued, even if it can make you money. Saying that. Okay. So green, yellow, this is orange. I don't have a yellow marker, and guess what? You wouldn't see it if I did anyway. So green, yellow, red is how I view things. So I got a project storyline, populate it on the key milestones. They're often significant things that are in your process when you got to transition a different set of tools, transition a different headspace, orient yourself a different way. Again, deconstruction is different than cleaning, different than reconstruction. Cleaning, demobilization is always the last step on the bus, because putting all the tools back and getting all the equipment to the shop, cleaning up the job site is a project in its own. It's always the end. It's not done until the client's happy, project's clean. Okay, sort that out, and then this is just then everything that's inside of each one of these domains, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit into the estimating realm. Everything falls into 4 categories: materials, labor, equipment, subcontractors. And when I say everything, be cautious of big generic painting statements. I mean everything. If I was asked to join SpaceX and send somebody to the moon, I would do exactly this process. Okay, let's take that and break the project of I'm standing here and the end, somebody standing on the moon, into its different bite-sized components, And then I would take each one of those components and go, okay, which ones do we easily understand? Well, we can already launch rockets. Okay, great. We've never pollinated things in like Mars, lunar, growing our own vegetables. So that's definitely a red one. But we have done long distance travel, at least to the moon, but we've never gone for years. Okay, segment it out that way, but then take each one of these elements and break them down into materials, labor, equipment, subcontractors. You have your estimate. And if you, because an estimate happens before a quote, but if you quote each one of these line items, or each one of these items is a line item in my quote that's broken into its 4 components, and then I can populate that rate back into my quote. So again, I'm saving time in the behind the scenes before the work begins. This is all how I streamline it. And to simplify, materials. These are things that are used up on a job site. So 2x6s are used up. In some senses, I'm going to say code's used up. Code like I'm thinking about computer coding. But you can sometimes reuse code or core code or anything like that. Okay, so materials are used up. Gas is an example of a material. Gas in your truck is used up, but the truck itself as equipment is used on multiple projects. So my saws, drills, trailer, levels, hammer, so on, that's equipment. Nails, screws, lumber, insulation, drywall, paint, all materials. So there's a carry forward on my equipment, and I often charge a fee for this. Not often, I do charge a fee for my equipment because there's a utilization. My drill will only last for so long, so there's a depreciation. I acknowledge that. And labor is the people force. How many people and for how long to do this? How many people and for how long to do this? How many people? And I'm telling you, I'm asking the people on my team, how many people to do this? How long will it take? Okay, what materials are we going to need? Are we going to need any help? Any extra help? Subcontractors, for example. If I'm a carpenter, I need an electrician, subcontractor, frame or a plumber, subcontractor. Or this is honestly where my disposal fees go to, like the landfill. They charge me, so $12 a ton or something like that, $24 a ton, to metric ton to dispose. Well, that's a subcontractor. I can either get to carry that forward or dispose of it, and they charge me a fee for that service that's flexible depending upon the size of the project. So that's it. Like it's so simple because I need it to be effective. I can do this with sticky notes. I've plugged it into Excel so that I can auto sum. Translates to Google Sheets because that shares easy, okay. But the elegance of this model is its simplicity. Figure out your story so you can break your story down into the 4 necessary elements of every single project. Clearly define the things that you absolutely understand because you'll be able to quote these ones easily. Spend a little bit more time on these ones and spend a lot more consideration, effort, focus, ask questions, get help, have the inspector come and take a look before those red areas so that you can de-risk them, so that your understanding goes up and your capacity goes up and your risk goes down. And if you're walking into a project like this and you know there's some yellows and some reds, this is where that communication gift that's yours and my responsibility, communicating to clients, you need to do that up front. I know we're running late and I'm just going to keep going because we're in the middle of this and I'd rather finish this for your understanding. Your gift of communication, again, goes back to that trust piece for the client. And you can just tell them up front, hey, listen, we're going to take this apart. We're going to start dismantling this thing. We're going to open up. We don't know what we're going to find. You might do a cultural consulting thing where you walk into an organization and say, hey, listen, we're expecting the get to know you process and the warm up to meet people to take 3 days, but we don't know if there's some things that could take 5. Talk about it so that they're expecting 3, it could take 5. That's totally fair. And if you're talking about, like, just in construction, the dismantling, you can pre-decide. Like, this is where a lot of tradesmen, I think, really do get lazy. It's like, well, I don't know, there might be rot behind the siding when we take it off. Okay, well, what's that going to look like? Rotten OSB and rotten 2x6s. Okay, so what's going to take to repair that? Maybe some shoring, okay, but it's going to be 2x6s and plywood. Like, that's how you're going to fix it, right? So price that in. Okay, so just so you know, we don't know if we're going to find some rot. So this is our standard rate, is we charge $1,000 per half sheet of plywood. So if we find some rot, we can just pre-decide the fee to fix it. I haven't quoted it in. It's in my assumptions. It's an extra charge if required. If we find rot up to the size of a half sheet of plywood, it's $1,000. And if we find, half sheet here and half sheet here, it will be 1,000 and 1,000. So there's a $2,000 extra charge, so that you can warm the client up. They can clearly see the size of the patch and repair. You've already pre-ordered the extra plywood, the extra 2x6s, so that you don't have to stop, because again, the most expensive thing to you and your company and your project, whether or not you realize it, is downtime. Because going to work is making money time. And when you're waiting for a client to make a decision, to respond to your email, for you to go pick up the materials, to think about it, to talk about pricing, or you found some rot, now you got to think about, how am I going to charge this? Brandon said, don't charge it hourly. I guess I got to default to that hybrid model where we charge this little portion hourly and go back to the contract. Or play to your experience, to your advantage, let the unknowns inform your quote, so that you can go, hey, I bet you I could take that out in 2 hours and it'll cost me $150 in materials and $1,000 per half sheet. Now you're contracting again for the unknowns. Brilliant opportunity for you to stay in the driver's seat of progress on the project, rather than the back and forth. Okay, so we've talked story, we've talked red, yellow, green. Yeah, okay. And this is project planning 5 questions. I care a lot about this. It again came because I got asked, why do you guys not bump into problems the way that other people in their businesses were bumping into problems? And I didn't initially have an answer, and then I spent some time, and it's what I came up with. So I got 5 questions. Every project I ask, and every single one of these, and especially on the yellows and the reds, don't get lazy and take for granted the things that you think you understand. Stay sharp and present with the routine and status quo, so you're not surprised by things that you took for granted. But 5 questions. What is the attractive thing that we're trying to do? Okay, I'll explain these in more in depth. How will we know that we have succeeded at that attractive thing? What's going to get in our way? What are we going to do about what gets in our way? And the 5th is the bonus, is what would help make this process even easier? Okay, so I want to walk you through that. Typical context for me when I'm talking about these is in a boardroom. We're talking strategic planning. We're talking quarterly goals for the year. We're talking about team initiatives. We're talking about launching new projects. Like this is where this was derived. And I was just so frustrated with watching typical business practice. And it's like they set out on this plan to launch this new app, and then they are always late and always over budget. And it's just so frustrating for me to watch, for the team to experience the tension, and then for the owner to go, well, I thought you said you'd be done by March, and here we are in June. I don't have the money for this. We're over budgets. Shareholders are waiting. All this fiasco. I realized that this is what I do in each one of my projects, and granularity in each one of these phases. I'm asking myself, like, what am I trying to do here? And that's why I put these story headings. These are like chapter titles, like deconstruction, okay, reconstruction, mobilization, cleanup, demobilization. Like those are our heading themes that create clarity. Now I'm going to suggest that when you're at a project launch or a strategy meeting, you can come up with a much more attractive slogan. What we want to avoid is the business principle of, what's our corporate goal this year? Increase revenue by 5%. And then ask yourself why the team isn't so enthusiastic to make the CEO 5% more money this year. Like, nobody is energized by that. But people are energized by taking people to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. People are energized by increasing revenue this year so we can get everybody on a permanent benefits package. We are keen on ensuring that we're transitioning our factories and utilities to a net zero in the next 4 years. rather than 2050. You're gonna be dead by then. It's like just finding meaningful things, attractive things, restoring Sally and Judy's home. That's rather than demoing the wall. Like, find a message that's worth communicating, that speaks to the heart of the matter and the people in the room. If it's about making spreadsheets happy, you've already lost. You can't rally the best of your team and the people and your stakeholders if it's a dull goal. That's my experience. I've watched it happen. Do as you will. But again, set a target that's worth achieving. And then clearly define how you'll know you've succeeded. It's like, we're gonna go into space and go, okay, well, landing on the moon has a destination. You'll know that you've succeeded if you got a man standing on the moon. This is an awesome testament to, like, we're setting a target and hit it. None of this shoot at the moon and if you miss, you aim amongst the stars. You need to be a little bit more concrete so that the people that you're working with can trust that they're home, that they're working towards a goal, there's a finish line. In Agile, we call that sprints. You need to set the target and have short, measurable wins, demonstrate success, common definition of done so that people can orient. And when I say clean, I have a definition of done for clean. So it's my version of clean, I can promise you, has evolved over the years. And mine is different than yours and is different than everybody else's on my team. So we have a common understanding of what clean means, so that some people's standards are just way too high and we'd be cleaning for 3 weeks, and other people's standards are like not good enough to pass. So we want the client to be happy. We want to hold our heads high. So you can set a definition of done. So if you're going to say, hey, we're done when the project's clean, this is how we know we've succeeded. Perfect. What's going to get in our way is the first de-risking problem. It's like, oh man, we're going to take apart all this siding. There might be rot behind it. Oftentimes that's as far as most people dare go with their planning, and they're missing the next step. So, hey, there might be rot, which could cause us to slow down, could cause us to have to talk to the owner, which could cost more money in the project. So that's where the necessary question is, so what are we going to do about that issue if it occurs? So that you have your contingency plan already loaded up, ready to go for those. They're not unexpected. Your awareness has brought them to your attention. So it's not to say be afraid of them, but have a plan ready. If there's hey, we're doing hot work today, there could be a fire. I have 2 fire extinguishers and I have an extra person on standby because there was a big condo fire that burnt down. There was a guy roofing a torch on membrane. He was working alone after hours. He had a fire extinguisher, but while he was doing his thing working over here, the fire's over there. He didn't even know. And by the time he turned around to realize his fire extinguisher was insufficient. I think it was a 5-story townhome that just went up in flames. That's years in the reconstruction process. So hot work, here's the extra piece of equipment. Here's the manpower or the woman power to just make sure that that risk is addressed so that if it occurs, we're ready for it. Why? So there's no delay. Respect time, respect people, you're respecting budgets, and your project gets done. That's the beauty of it. And then the 5th one is like the Kaizen question, which is, again, borrowing from lean and agile principles. It's like, it's asking ourselves, what could we do to make this even better? And so if I go back to my example of deconstructing this home to remediate a rotten wall, man, that's going to be a lot of heavy rotten lumber that we're going to have to carry up. So I first of all broke it into smaller phases over different days, and I had extra manpower so that it was just easier on the team, easier on the people. And the beautiful part about, I always overstaff. If I could get away with 3, I always have 4, because that means there's a floater to always help, which means we're just way more productive. It's amazing how that works. And there's always somebody to clean, so things don't pile and shrapnel doesn't blow away in the wind and all the things. It's a brilliant, just natural strategy. Of overstaffing can feel like a waste of finances unless you have a team that's oriented towards time productivity, because then an extra person starts to anticipate the needs of the team in front. So the preparation starts happening. So you're kind of like 1.5 steps ahead every time, and it's a great way to go. But okay, so saying that, if you have an attractive goal at the start of the day, let's orient the team, get everybody on board, level the playing field. This is what we're trying to accomplish today. We'll know that we're done for the day. Sometimes we finish early. If we're done, we're done. Or if you're done at the end of the quarter or the end of the 2-week sprint or whatever your deal is, assign something meaningful to the title, and you'll help align your people so that we're on the elevator talking to their team on their way out for lunch. They can talk about that awesome thing they're trying to do. That'll sure go a long way. Clarify when you're done. Ask yourself, what could go wrong? And that's oftentimes where you'll start to circle yellow things, and you might even find a red thing, and then ask yourself, what are you going to do if it does go wrong, and put some measures in place so that you're ready. Definitely slow down. If there's yellow or red elements, just slow down. It's like slow down to go faster is definitely, again, another agile principle. Gives you some time to be creative, flexible. So we have covered a lot of territory on this. We unpacked some pretty substantial things in my world. This limitations, I can't see you. I hope this really works for you. This is coming out of 12 years and like millions of dollars in work, and refining the process so that it's dense, like dense in simplicity, and but also useful in a multiple set of contexts. And yes, I've applied this in the digital space, in web and IT, and in consulting, and in construction, in all kinds of contexts. So I'll be curious to hear how you apply it, and what modifications you would extend on your experience, because this is what I've done. Doesn't mean it's what you've done or what you have to do. I know that this will hopefully clarify some things for folks. All right, all the best. We'll see you again soon.